We have the pleasure of welcoming Mark S. Babbitt today to our interview series, Leaders Hum. I'm Sumita Mariam from the peopleHum team. Before we begin, just a quick introduction of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year, and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Marcus Babbitt is a world-renowned leadership and career mentor. He is the president of WorkIQ and the CEO and founder of UTurn, specifically built for young aspiring entrepreneurs. He is an official member of the Forbes Coaches Council and contributes excellent content for the same. Featured in Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and a lot many world-renowned publications, a coach, mentor, and author, we are extremely happy to welcome Mark S. Babbitt to our interview series. So welcome, Mark. We're thrilled to have you.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So moving on to the questions, Mark. The first question I have for you, obviously, can you tell us a little bit more about UTurn? I mean, what was the vision you had when you started something like this?
Of course, UTurn, after 10 years in the online recruiting business, UTurn was a passion project for me and my team. We wanted to put the human back into human resources. And at the time, much like we're going through now, there was a global recession, unemployment was very high, and we had been trained by the recruiting system to just keep clicking the apply now button on monster.com and indeed.com and many of the other sites, and something good would happen. And we had stopped, because of that conditioning, talking with mentors, building our soft skills, building mutually beneficial relationships. We had stopped being human because we knew something eventually good would happen if we just kept applying for jobs. And then once the recession hit, then that all stopped, and people weren't getting jobs that way anymore. And college graduates were unemployed for a year, 2 years after graduation. And so UTurn was built to close that gap, to make human resources more human, and to build those relationships that would eventually lead to referrals and jobs.
Oh, that's nice. That's wonderful. So, you always wanted to, encourage young people to lead. But right now, with what we are facing, and you are a leadership mentor, so you should be able to give us, some insights on how leaders are supposed to respond to this current situation. I mean, managing a remote team is not really familiar to the leaders of today. So how do you manage, positive change in a crisis as this?
Well, first we have to acknowledge where we came from. And the reality is not many of today's business leaders, especially, and I put myself in this category, us old white guys, we were not prepared for this. We were not, our mentors, our predecessors, our fathers, our mothers, none of us had to deal with this crisis. And it isn't like we can go to our mentors and learn how to lead remote teams and ask them for their been there, done that advice, because nobody's been there and nobody's done that. So first, the first step, I think, is to acknowledge where we are now, that we're all learning this together, and that empathy and a little bit of compassion and maybe even some vulnerability, instead of being that decisive, loud, autocratic leader, just to say, look, we're literally, as we keep hearing, it's now become a cliche, we're all in this together. And so let's learn this together. Let's learn what works. Let's learn what doesn't work. And most important, let's make sure we keep injecting a human interface into all this technology that we're using. And let's not lose sight that we are talking human to human here. And of course, we all have our work to do, just like we always did. But we don't have that virtual water cooler anymore. So let's use Zoom like we are now, Slack. Let's use the technologies we have available to us to maintain those human-to-human relationships.
Yeah, so we're taking the help of technology to keep that up. I mean, have that water cooler conversations and all of that. But how important, like, is it to be aware and using the latest technology to survive out there? I mean, to get a great job or for a good start in your career.
Well, I think for the last 10 years, technology has been a critical element in career success. And I think for the most part, younger generations have embraced this wholeheartedly. And it's not the Gen Y and the Gen Z contributors that are struggling with this. It's frankly, it's us older generations that are learning how to deal with this. I remember 100 conversations of just a few years ago with people who used to be middle managers that now had to learn how to job hunt all over again. And we were doing video interviews and phone interviews, and it was just so different. And now here's the good news. This crisis has brought upon us a need for these career critical tools, and we're all learning how to use them now. We're all on the same plane, and tools like Zoom and Slack that are kind of like nice to have things in the past, they're now mission critical. So we're all learning this together. And there's all kinds of memes out there about, we tried to talk to grandma on Zoom for Easter, and it took 30 minutes just to get the technology right, and by then the conversation was over. So now we're all being kind of drug into this. Here's what's important as we're learning all these new tools for the first time and integrating the technology into our career space, our leadership space, is that we have to remember technology for the most part it's the how. It's how we communicate. We don't get on Zoom just to get on Zoom, right? It's a communication tool, but it shouldn't distract us from our purpose. It shouldn't distract us from what we need to get done that day. And we've all fallen victim to what a time suck technology can be, and how distracting Facebook and Twitter and all that can be while we're working. And we just have to remember that we do have a job to do, and let's not get so sucked into being at home, being on the technology, enjoying our social resources, but not get any work done.
So yeah, technology is critical for everyone right now. So I came across this very interesting, concept that you explained in one of your interviews, your earlier interviews, which was the concept of open, ordinary people and extraordinary network. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
I can. That phrase, that acronym, was coined by the co-author of my 2014 book called A World Gone Social. And Ted Koine, bless his heart, was just a huge believer, still is, in that we are just one person. And even as one person, if we stick to our values, if we put values on the same pedestal as we do results, then good things will happen, of course. But we are pretty much ordinary and as individuals. But when we work together, and this COVID-19 crisis has certainly brought out the best in many of us in this regard, when we work together, when we sacrifice together, when we're all driven by the same purpose, and we become extraordinary. And Ted used to love to say that no matter how ordinary we are as a single person, we can do extraordinary things as a network, as a group, as a community. And that phrase, when it first came out, it was an important part of our book. It's even more important now, 5 years later. And we're living it. We're literally living that phrase right now as a global community.
Yeah, it's all those elements, little elements that come together and make something very beautiful. So that's a great concept. So Mark, you've had a tremendous experience. And what do you think are the changes, in organizational cultures that you've seen over the years in your experience? And why do you think it's shifting to more of a casual setting with time?
Well, I will tell you this. I, over the years, have grown in patience with how slowly organizational cultures are changing. I anticipated that 10 years ago, when the industrial age kind of started its end cycle and the social age or the digital age began, I thought we would more quickly morph to a more human culture, a human-centered culture within globally, and it didn't happen. It hasn't happened as quickly as I had hoped it would. I believe that finally in the last few years, in many, especially in industry specific cycles, startup world in particular, we have finally moved away from that autocratic command and control leadership style, and the factors I mentioned earlier: empathy, compassion, vulnerability, active listening, relentless giving. All of those things are finally coming into play, and our workplaces are finally going from not just focused on shareholder return on investment, but stakeholders, our employees, our customers, our communities. They're all becoming just as important as that, that mythical third quarter shareholders report. And I'm just thrilled to see the change happening. And lately we've taken this even to another level, and it's even more encouraging that organizations, some willingly, some being kind of drug into the cycle, are actually being forced to care about global issues like inequality, education, internet access, climate change. We're seeing more and more leaders take a stand. And that is just so critically important to building the kind of company culture that we want people to aspire to. And I'll tell you, it's not all just because it's the right thing to do. Companies all over the world are learning that if you have a caring, inclusive culture, you will attract better talent, period. And so a lot of companies that don't, excuse me, that don't even yet understand the concept well, know how important it is to their company's future. Because if you want to be an industrial age company, if you want to maintain your old autocratic leadership style, your best talent's going to go work for somebody else. And that's it's that important to change your culture to one where people actually want to be there. The more female leaders we have in higher executive positions, the younger leaders that are starting new companies or taking over old companies, they instinctively get this. They're not suffering from what we call in our next book boomer male syndrome, or BMS. They don't feel the need to have all the answers. They don't need to be the ultimate decider. It's not all about them. It's about the community. It's about the people. And so we're seeing it very clearly among our female leaders and our younger leaders that this is how companies are being born. There's no transition necessary. They're already there because that's how they decided to build their company.
Yeah, so I think the millennials are all out there, establishing power in a good way, and also transitioning workplaces for a more people-centric approach. So talking about millennials, with the increase in the millennial workforce, we have the rise of the gig economy. And what do you think, how do you think the gig economy is going to fit in the whole structure that we have? And how do you think the organizational cultures and the leadership strategies are going to change, with the growing prevalence of the gig economy?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll give you a little personal background because I am biased in this area. I became a single father of 4 kids in 1999. And I had to be a gig economy contributor. I couldn't stand the thought of somebody else raising my kids. So I immediately started working from home, contract to contract, company to company. I lived the birth of the gig economy. And so I can't see living, working any other way. So I'm not objective when it comes to the gig economy. I believe it is the best possible way to live our lives, to share our knowledge, to contribute to the economy, and to grow companies. And I have 2 companies now, 1 more on the way, and all of them are virtual companies. We've never had a brick and mortar office. UTurn, WorkIQ, now a new company we're starting calling Remotely, that helps remote workers understand what it's like to live and thrive in the gig economy. That's how I live my life, and I see the value in it. So now, with that background, I will tell you that even if I wasn't such a passionate advocate of the gig economy and remote work, the reality is it is our future, and this crisis has accelerated that future quite quickly. And if anything good comes out of this whole thing, we will know how built we are as individuals to thrive within that new economy, or maybe not, and what soft skills we need to develop to make that transition. And even more important, my hope is that companies and executives, especially of the older companies, will learn they can trust people to work independently and autonomously from home, or Starbucks, or the third desk, or wherever that is, and they will get the work done without that command and control style leadership. In fact, I hope that this crisis leads us to the realization that command and control leadership is a thing of the past. It's no longer required for most of us.
Yeah. So just because you mentioned about a virtual workspace, I just wanted to know, what is your opinion on a lot of organizations thinking about shifting to a complete remote work after the crisis? Even after the crisis, a lot of people are thinking about, why do we invest so much on real estate and office buildings when we can all work efficiently from home? So how do you think that structure is going to work?
Well, we have to realize how important the real estate and office development industries are to our global economy. It's huge. But the reality is a phone hanging on the wall with a cord used to be huge too. And we don't have those landlines anymore. So this transition is going to happen, and we're going to have to replace that segment of our economy with something just as robust. And it is going to be a harsh transition for many, I believe. Here's what I anticipate happening. I believe it's going to be a balanced situation. I believe that companies, now that they've learned they can trust people to get their work done without being watched over, are going to say, well, look, every Friday you can work from home, or 3 days a week you can work from home. I don't believe people are just going to, okay, well, we'll just close down our 120,000 square foot office space and let everybody work from home. I believe it will be a gradual transition, a graceful transition that will allow one economy segment to replace another. And by the way, we only have to look at all the money right now being spent on Amazon.com and Alibaba on microphones and earbuds and cameras and lighting to see that the transition's already happening. So we're just spending our money in different areas. The downside of this transition, as many people are learning, is the balance between life and family and work. And especially now with schools being closed down for this crisis, people are having to learn that work isn't just at work anymore. And we have children we need to homeschool at the same time we're supposed to be working, and we have elderly parents and grandparents to take care of, and we have our dogs and our cats and our pets to care for. And this is all happening now while we're supposed to be working. And how does that all happen? I think that's another reason why the transition will happen more slowly and more gracefully, because we're all of us, we're learning how to do this all together. And it's not an easy thing sometimes to stop, no, I'm sorry, guys, I have to get off the meeting right now. I have a hard stop. My 9-year-old has a homeschooling lesson. That's quite a transition to make. So it'll take us some time.
Yeah, I hope all of us learn from this and, make that transition count. So lastly, Mark, if there is any important sound bites that you would like to leave our viewers.
Well, since we've been talking so much about the crisis, here's what I've been saying a lot over the last few weeks. Use this time of self-isolation to grow. And almost everybody's seen those memes out there that says, if you haven't learned something new during the coronavirus crisis, you've lacked dedication. And I don't subscribe to that theory at all. It's everybody's handling this crisis, this situation differently, and we're all going at our own pace. But within that pace, use this time as wisely as possible. Network, reach out to people you haven't talked to in a long time, old classmates, old colleagues at work, your boss at your internships, your mentors or would-be mentors. Reach out, and once you've exhausted that path, focus on one soft skill and develop that soft skill so your resume or your entrepreneur portfolio is even stronger. Don't get sucked into Netflix. Don't think of this as a vacation. This is a time for career progression. This is a time for growth, and use this time wisely.
Yeah, I think it's very important to keep ourselves productive during the lockdown times and the work from home times. So that was wonderful, and thank you so much for that. And Mark, it was a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate your time and sharing your views with us. It's been a very enriching experience for me personally, and I'm sure it'll be for our viewers too. And so, let's keep in touch. And
all right, I'd like that very much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right.